Hello and welcome to the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So far, we've looked at the initial family tree of Manu and Shatarupa, and that's the backbone for the whole. That's the backbone that all the stories of the fourth canto are told from. That's like the timeline for the stories. Or that's the reference to the stories. What all the stories have in common is that they all are involve the main character is some kind of a descendant of Manu and Shatarupa. So, for example, Sati is the granddaughter of Manu and Shatarupa, and then she marries Shiva, and that's the next story, the story of Shiva and Sati. And then after that, we have other descendants. How do we get to Dhruva? Dhruva is from Uttanapada, another this is a grandson of Manu and Shatarupa. And we hear about Dhruva's story. And then when Dhruva's story was finished, we wanted to hear about the Prachetas, who somehow are connected with Dhruva. And then Maitreya starts to explain that they're grand kids from Dhruva. But on the way to talking about the Prachetas, which is the final story that you see on the screen, that unified brothers, he gets to their forefather, who is Prithu. And he says that Prithu was an avatar of Hari. So Vidura says, okay, stop, I want to hear. I want to hear about that person. So then we heard about, let's see, let me scroll over to that. Then we heard the descendants of Dhruva up to Prithu. That's what I just mentioned. Then Vena, Prithu's father, not exactly a father, but father, and how he was a very bad king. He was kind of the first bad king. And then we heard how he wound up getting assassinated by the scholars. And then since they needed a king, they cloned Vena. But they did something by cloning, by making one person that had all of his flaws, or many of the flaws, and therefore then they could make two people that didn't have those flaws from Vena. And that was Prithu and Archie, his wife. But then we heard how they asked Prithu's mother? Oh no, they coronated him. He has no mother. They coronated him. So then we heard, last week about the coronation of Prithu as the new king. And then at a certain point in the coronation, got these glasses, singers came forward and were going to sing about Prithu's glories. And then Prithu said, "O narrators, hey bards and gentle singers, I have not yet manifest my qualities, so why should you already make me the object of praise? Do not praise me yet, or your words will be baseless. If in the future I do things worthy of your beautiful song, glorify me then. In any case, the truly cultured prefer to sing of the supreme subject of poetry rather than singing about abominable things. Even if, as Brahma said, I am an expansion of the supreme, I should still not encourage you to praise me. A person who really has good qualities would never encourage admirers to glorify him, for that would destroy his good qualities. And a person who doesn't really have good qualities, okay, so that's one scenario. A person who really has good qualities would never encourage admirers to glorify him, for that would destroy his good qualities. And a person who doesn't really have good qualities just makes a fool of himself by accepting praise. That's why people who are truly powerful and famous hate to hear their own praise. Those who are truly exalted are very modest and feel that even their greatest achievements are flawed and embarrassing. My dear narrators and singers, I'm very sorry. I have not yet shown any greatness in the world, so how can I be so childish as to ask you to describe my deeds? So he basically forbids the singers from singing about him at his coronation. But guess what happens? You get a song of Prithu's glories next. So here's how this chapter starts off. Delighted to hear the king's nectarian words, the sages ordered the singers to sing. So there's a couple of interesting points in this. One is that the sages can override the king, and the king does not protest. That's why he's a good king, right? Vena would not even listen to the advice of the sages. And Vena is the king that deserves to be assassinated. Prithu is completely subservient to the advice of the sages. And he's the example of the best king that you could get. So the sages are superior to the kings, and their orders override the orders of a king. That's an interesting thing about Vedic times and Vedic culture. So in this particular case, Prithu says, you guys are forbidden from singing. But the sages say, sing. And they start singing. And the other interesting thing about this is that they are delighted to hear the king's nectarian words, and so they ordered the sages, they ordered the singers to sing. So in other words, they're very happy to see Prithu doesn't want to hear himself praised. That's why he should be praised. He should be praised. It shouldn't. A praisable person should not go unpraised. It's a sin to let a praisable person go unpraised. But the praisable person never asks for praise. That's what makes them praisable. But it's a crime on our part to not praise them. So the praisable person should get praised, but not by their instigation or not by their urging. It should be from the praisers who override them from not, and the person not wanting praise is actually the reason why they should get the praise. So that's interesting. Delighted to hear the king's nectarian words, the sages ordered the singers to sing. So now, what you get next in the song from these singers is a summary of Prithu's life. And then Vidura is going to say, there's a lot of interesting things in that song. I want to know more about X, Y, and Z. And that's going to give us the following chapters. So first the singers explained, we cannot sing about your glory, for you are an avatar of the supreme divinity. That's misleading. We cannot truly. That's what they're saying. We can, of course, I can sing about him, but can't truly fully describe it properly. That's what they're saying. You cannot truly sing about your glory, for you are an avatar of the supreme divinity, born from... So they're starting off by saying, we're going to sing a nice song about you, but you're nicer than this song. Born from the arms of Vena, your heroism is beyond the comprehension of orators. Nonetheless, we will do our best to elaborate on what we learned about you from the scholars. So this is also an interesting thing. Even when something is beyond your capacity to properly understand, you should still do your best to understand it to your best extent with the guidance of sages and scholars. So that's why they say we will do our best to elaborate on what we learned about you from the scholars. Now, here are nectarian songs about the magnanimous glory of Prithu, the avatar of Hari's expansion. Now, here's the song. Now, it would be fun if we could make this into a poem like it is in Sanskrit and have a rhythm to it and everything like it does in Sanskrit and set it to music. But that's a bit beyond me. At the time, at least, yeah, it's a little bit beyond my ability to do in the amount of time that I'm willing to use for it, which means it's beyond me. So here's my rendition. This king upholds supreme dharma. He shows the world how to follow dharma. He's the guardian of dharma's rules and the regulator of those who transgress them. So that's the first thing about the king. They don't make up their own laws. They don't make things suit themselves. They follow the dharma the natural law or the law which is specified in the Veda. But this is a big difference. When we think of king, we think of somebody who's at the top. When Veda has a king, it's somebody who's not at the top. They're administering. They're at the top strength-wise, but they're not at the top concept-wise. They're enforcing laws set by higher sources. This king's single form, therefore, upholds the forms of all those who protect the world. So what a king does is he empowers and enables other king-like people to function. He doesn't try to squash other king-like people. He tries to encourage and incorporate other king-like people. He is the benefactor of the leaders and the led, giving everyone their rightful share at the proper time. He receives the riches of some and distributes it appropriately at the right time. So all the rich people who are complaining about being taxed can shut up. That would be nice. That's the point. When you're rich, you should be taxed. You should give your money. You should give more money when you're rich than when you're poor. He receives the riches of some, that's the rich people, and he distributes it appropriately at the right time to the people who need it. So you can see this basic system of taxation is not some new modern problem. It's just an ancient way that societies have always been set up, that everybody contributes some money to the community, and then the leader of the community uses the money to benefit the community. And that the people who have more contribute more. His mighty welfare is equal to all, as the powerful sun shines everywhere. He's patient with the disorderly and tries to uplift even them. He's always compassionate to everyone and supports the needy like the earth supports all creatures. When the gods withhold blessings, he who is Hadi in the role of a king immediately protects the citizens from danger and death, as if he were Indra himself. So this is actually this is kind of interesting for people that are interested in astrology. This guy, like he said, he hasn't done anything yet. The Prithu hasn't done anything yet. So what are they going to sing about? How do they know what he's going to do? They said the scholars told them. So how did the scholars figure out what this guy's going to do? Astrology. Probably astrology. It's not explicitly said, but probably via astrology or similar things, they foresee what Prithu is going to do. A lot of this is just like, here's his character, here's his general behavior, but now this one is a specific thing that he does. This is one very important incident that we will hear about at length in the upcoming chapters. When the gods withhold blessings, he who is Hadi in the role of a king immediately protects the citizens from danger and death, as if he were Indra himself. So what's going to happen is the karma for the society is not great, because they're just correcting from the previous situation where everybody became thieves. So they still have bad karma momentum from all that nefarious activity. So there's going to be famine in Prithu's kingdom, and this verse here is about how he deals with the famine. Everyone sees his generous face as the epitome of nectar. Let's see how this looks if it goes on one line. Everyone sees his generous face as the epitome of nectar. He looks upon everyone with affection, smiling broadly and beautifully. His paths are not visible. His plans are kept confidential. His intentions... Let's get rid of the word kept. His paths are not visible. His plans are confidential. His intentions are profound. His wealth is not fully demonstrated. Just as Pracheta Varuna conceals himself within the seas, he conceals his stature as the font of unlimitedly glorious qualities. So, very interesting. This is the king's personality. This is the personality of the most powerful man that ever lived. He's not going out and shouting at people and demonstrating his power all the time. One of my favorite memories is when I first came to Japan. My wife's cousin, who's the young priest of the temple that they run. He gave me a fan, like a Japanese fan, and on the fan there's some Chinese letters, and I said, "What does it mean?" So basically, he explained to me it means there's no need to talk because whatever's true is obvious. And he said it's about a person. There's no need to talk about yourself because whatever is true is obvious. So that's kind of the king. That's Prithu's personality. His conceals his nature. There's no need to demonstrate and always assert. If you're an actual man, men are pretty assertive, right? But now we're talking about the most powerful man ever. He's not overly asserting himself all the time. He prefers to actually be withdraw a bit of his power, because he doesn't want to overdo it and he doesn't want to overshow it. And you also, just as a basic principle in any kind of competitive situation, you never show all of your power at one point. Then you reveal everything to potential enemies. So his paths are not visible. His plans are confidential. His intentions are profound. That means they're difficult to fathom. His wealth is not fully demonstrated. And the other interesting thing now is this word Pracheta. Just as Pracheta Varuna conceals himself within the seas. That's interesting because Prithu's story is coming as we're trying to get to the story of the Prachetas. And the Prachetas, they went into the sea to do their yoga. They went into the sea. They did their yoga under the water. This is an interesting thing. There must be some meaning. And Pracheta means he who is concealed by the water. There's some other meaning to it. Pracheta also means one who's very careful or attentive. Pracheta might also mean the one that you have to look for. That isn't obvious. So he is the forefather of the Prachetas. They're going to inherit that quality also. Just as Pracheta Varuna conceals himself within the seas, he conceals his stature as the font of unlimitedly glorious qualities. Calamity cannot approach him. From afar he curbs it. No one can conquer the flame born from the wood of Vena. He sees the outer and inner nature of everyone's deeds, just like the all-witnessing, impartial soul of all bodies. This king does not stray from the moral path. He punishes the guilty even if they are his own children, and he does not punish the innocent even if they are his enemies. So this is an important thing, and also interesting the way it's worded. Because Prithu's grandfather, Anga, maybe failed in this regard. Anga was the father of Vena. Vena was a disaster. Vena was a violent, arrogant disaster, murderous, killing kids even as a kid, killing other kids. But his father, instead of punishing Vena, just gave up and left. So the singers are saying Prithu does not have that fault. Prithu would punish. Where is it? Prithu would punish a guilty person even if that person is his son or his daughter. It wouldn't give any leniency or anything just because you're on his team. And also, he's not going to punish somebody who's innocent, even if they are his enemy, and it would be advantageous for him to punish them. So that's a very important part of government, especially the legal section of government, is impartiality. Everybody knows that. So Prithu, as the ideal king, has extreme impartiality. His wheel of jurisdiction spans the edges of the known world, like the divine sun whose brilliance shines everywhere. His behavior delights the citizens of the world, and they are delighted to call him king. And I have a footnote here that's actually the meaning of the word king in Sanskrit. The meaning of the word king in Sanskrit is the word for king in Sanskrit is usually Raja. It's the most common way of addressing a king is Raja. What Raja actually means is related to the word Rashi. What does Rashi actually mean? Rash means light or brilliant. And Rashi is a part of the sun's light. You divide the sun's orbit into 12 divisions and you get the Rashis of the Rashmi. The sun is the Rashmi, the brilliant one, and he has Rashi, 12 divisions. This word king is related to the word for sun. It's Raja, a person who gives brightness, who gives light to people. So, related also to the word light is Ranja, which means happiness. Generally, warmth and light is the cause for happiness and health and prosperity, and coldness and darkness is the cause for death and problems. So the king, by it being the source of light, is the source of happiness and inspiration and welfare for people. So there's two etymologies for the word Raja. One is to get it from Rasha, which is light, and one is to get it from Ranja, which is joy. But either way you etymologize the word Raja, you see that it basically is the same thing. And both ways it means here's the person who makes people happy. Is the foundation upon which people can have their life and happiness. Basically, a king. Yeah, I'm not. Okay. His behavior delights the citizens of the world, and they are delighted to call him king. He considers himself the determined servant of philosophers and elders. He is of solemn vow and simple promises. This is so. First of all, it's interesting that he considers himself a servant, even though he's the king, but he's a servant of not every Joe and Sally. He's a servant of philosophers and elders. He's a servant of the wise. And then he makes simple promises. This is very interesting too. If you're making complex problems and you're trying to cheat, complex promises. Promises with caveats, promises with a million conditions on them. That's not so glorious, because you're really making a bunch of loopholes for yourself. This king, you just make a simple promise. He protects all creatures respectfully, like a father towards the needy. He treats his wife as if she were half of his own self, and he treats other women with the same devotion he shows his mother. He behaves like an affectionate. This, by the way, is the reason for the custom, which is not particularly widespread anymore in India, but there is a custom in certain circles of referring to women as mom, even if they have nothing to do with you biologically or familially, and regardless of their age as well. This is why, because Prithu exhibited this behavior and was considered ideal. That the way he treated women was different between the wife and not the wife. The wife he treated as if she's as important as himself. She's just himself. She's as important as he is, and everybody else he treated they're as important as my mother. They're as respectable as my mother. He behaves like an affectionate father towards his people and like a humble servant towards those who comprehend spirituality. He treats this is so amazing this is the most powerful man in the world. He treats all creatures with the same love he would show himself, nourishing their happiness and considering them dear. He seeks the company of those who are liberated from partialities and attachments, and his hands punish the evil. He is the all-attractive himself, a portion of the Master of Threes, the original origin and soul of all descended into our world. By seeing him, the wise realize that everything else is a dalliance of ignorance without real worth. This king is a master of gods among men, doing nothing but protecting the earthly realm. to the borders of the Sunrise Mountain. Like the sun roaming southward and northward, he encircles the world in his glorious chariot, holding a bow. What does they mean, sun roaming southward and northward? They mean Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. Apparently that was kind of on their mind and important. As he travels, the protectors of humanity and the world offer him valuable gifts, and women glorify him. That's important. Women glorify him as the original king, for they see him carrying Vishnu's trademark discus. They will say. Now, the rest of the song is not the singers just singing on their own behalf. Now they're mimicking the song that they say women will sing about Prithu. So that part of the song is this. Acting as the father of his citizens, this original king restores their prosperity by milking the wealth of the earth. So this is that one specific incident that I was telling you about. That they foresee the qualities and character of Prithu, but the sages also probably astrologically foresee his particular activities to some degree of specificity. So before it was mentioned that when the gods withhold their blessings, this king will protect the citizens. Just like Indra. Just like Indra overrides the rest of the gods. So now here's more specificity. The women give more specificity. He will restore the prosperity of the citizens by milking the wealth of the earth. This is going to really pique Vidura's interest, and he's going to want to know why they would use the word milking and what is the problem that the citizens have and what actually happens. What does he do? So that's one specific thing. Here's another one. With his arrows, he will level the mountains like Indra. Indra also is called Giri Adi or something. The enemy of mountains. He had this problem with mountains. Oh, because he's Parjanya. So he's clouds, and the clouds get stuck on mountains, right? So, but the clouds with the weather, they wear down the mountain. So Indra, the god Indra, who is the clouds, attacks mountains and makes them flat. Prithu's going to do something like that. With the mountains, he's going to do something with the landscaping of India and the world. He's going to make it flatter. And here it says creating smooth trade routes. I want to look this up, but I don't know if you guys want to take all that time to watch me being quiet to look it up at this. But let's do it, actually, because I'm also thinking that it's for the agriculture. Because I know the story because we've gone there before. It's actually because Bhumi Devi herself said to avoid this problem of famine in the future, you have to make the earth you have to make me more flat. Because I'm too steep, the water is just running off me right away. But if you make me more flat, then the water will stay and seep in and the ground will be fertile. And that was the impetus for him to flatten the mountains. So actually what I think it is that he's cutting steps into the mountain, which are farmable. And so I'm wondering if it's not just to create smooth trade routes, but the trade route word might also mean to create good agriculture. Should we look that up right now? I'm going to just really quickly do that. This would be somewhere in 4th Canto, 16th chapter. And it would be kind of towards the end. Here we go. I found it already. It's the text 22. Ayam mahim gam dudhe dhiraja prajapati vrittikara prajanam yoli ladrin swasarasa kotya. What is that? Yoli layadrin. Yoli Yolilayadrin Swasarosa Kotya Bindan Samamgam Akarodyatendra. Let's figure this out. Oh, look. Oh, Vritti Kara. Vritti Kara. Yeah, that's acceptable. So Vritti means business, but it also means growth. Yeah, so I'll actually think about doing that, changing that later. Because what it says in Sanskrit is for Vrittikara, so that they can do their business or they can do their prosperity. So it could easily mean agriculture. All things considered, I think it's not really that he's making roads. I think it's that he's making stepped mountains. All right. Wherever he roams like a lion with his tail raised, the sound of his indisputably powerful bow sends the wicked fleeing into hiding. At the font of river... Now here's another specific incident. At the font of river Saraswati, he will execute 100 horse sacrifice. He will execute 100 horse sacrifices. During the 100th, Indra will steal the horse. And instead of making it sound like a brutal slaughter, I'm going to change it to ceremony. Because sacrifice is too connotational. At the font of river Saraswati, he will execute 100 horse ceremonies. During the 100th, Indra will steal a horse. So that's another specific incident that the singers are mentioning through the mouths of the women. And Vidura is going to want to know about this. What? Indra stole a horse from one of the Vedic ceremonies? What's that all about? And then another specific incident the women mentioned. This king will meet blessed Sanat Kumara in one of his private gardens. Who's Sanat Kumara? One of the 4 original creations of Brahma. Brahma created 4 beings initially to help him. But they kind of refused to do anything that he wanted. And they wanted to just like philosophize. So he got angry about that. And then that created Rudra. That anger created Rudra, the 5th. So the 4, Sanat Kumar is, I think, the leader of the 4, the oldest of the 4 Kumars. Prithu is going to meet him in his private garden and have a intimate conversation with him to obtain knowledge from him about pure loving devotion, granting realization of the supreme spiritual reality. So Vidura is going to be really interested in that. Prithu, the most powerful man on earth, will hear many such glorifications of his glorious deeds from many people in many ways. By the way, Prithu, the name basically means the most powerful person on earth. His circle of influence will expand unchecked, conquering all directions. He will use his power to destroy the world's miseries. The kings of gods and demons alike will glorify him, and he will be the mightiest Lord of earth. Prithu was satisfied with their song and returned their praise. This is also interesting. So when Prithu finishes hearing this lengthy song about himself, he's satisfied with them. And he doesn't say, oh, thanks a lot. He praises them back. He returns their praise by respectfully glorifying their talent and giving them gifts. So he doesn't just accept praise and not return praise. He finds what is praisable and praises it to anybody that praises him. It's a good example. He's setting a good example for us. Prithu was satisfied with their song and returned their praise by respectfully glorifying their talent and giving them gifts. He then showed similar respect to everyone. The leaders of the philosophers, warriors, farmers, and laborers. I don't know why that word is supposed to be spelled wrong. Maybe he doesn't need a U. The leaders of the philosophers, warriors, farmers, and laborers, and to his own servants, ministers, and priests, and to the citizens of town and country, down to the simplest merchants and employees. So that's the most powerful man in the world. He respects everyone. I know you think that's not true, but you cannot be the most powerful man in the world if people don't make you powerful. And people are not going to make you powerful if they don't like you. And if you don't empower them, they're not going to empower you. So the more that we empower people, the more that they have power to empower us, and the more that they have spontaneous desire to empower us. So respecting people and giving deference to people and giving power to people is the true, sure way to become respected, powerful, etc. All right, let me check and see if you guys have any questions on this so far. Today's a powerful day. Why do people make evil dictators powerful? Generally, evil dictators make themselves powerful. People are very stupid. I'm sorry. But people are very stupid. Evil dictators tell them, I'm going to empower you. We're going to make Germany a wealthy country again. I'm going to make Germany a wealthy country again. And that's going to mean you're going to have money and you're going to be powerful. I'm going to empower you if you just empower me. And so that's how you get Hitler. Yes, Graziella, the king is always associated to the sun. What does the name Anga imply esoterically? It means dear one. Somebody who's embraced. All right. Let's see what the remainder of this chapter is all about. The remainder of the chapter is just quickly Vidura's questions about this. Of course, Vidura had questions. The ladies said Prithu would milk the earth, he asked Maitreya. Why? Why did he do that? What sort of milk did she give? Who was her calf? And what did Prithu use as the milking pot? So he's got these specific questions. What's this thing about milking the earth? What are you talking about when you use the word milk? And then in that relation, to milk a cow, you need a calf and you need a pot. So what are those? I know that you're talking some symbolism of milking the earth. What is the milk? And then symbolically, who is the calf and what's the pot? They said Prithu would level the mountains to create smooth roads. We talked about that. How? How will he accomplish that? Earth's very nature is to become mountainous. The earth actually keeps making mountains. So that seems pretty Herculean to be able to reduce the mountains. How's he gonna do that? That's why I think Prithu may have created the stepped agricultural system, because it's not really fighting against the mountains. You're just leveling off sections of the mountain. They said Prithu gained transcendental knowledge from the blessed Sanat Kumar, the greatest knower of spirituality. Exactly what did the philosopher king learn? How did he apply it? What result did he achieve? I am very eager to hear all these wonderful things and more, because Prithu is a previous birth of my Prabhu, all attractive Krishna. Prithu is a previous birth of my Prabhu, all attractive Krishna. So in other words, Prithu is an avatar of Vishnu or Hari. That means that he's a previous incarnation of Krishna, Vishnu Hari. Vidura's Prabhu, Vidura's object of affection is Krishna, so he wants to hear about Prithu because they're related. So please tell me all about transcendent Krishna who took the form of Venus' son and milked the earth. I will listen attentively and with devotion. The end. That's the end of chapter 16. Any questions? No, he actually did something with about the mountains. Didn't they say? with his arrows, he will level the mountains. Like Indra. Indra Indra actually hits the mountains with thunderbolts to flatten them. Prithu is going to hit them with arrows, or she's actually going to carve the mountains. It's not raising the water or something. Thank you, S. Anything else? All right, then. Thank you very much for joining me.